The morning sun touched the city gently as people hurried through the streets, each carrying their own stories, worries, and plans. At the corner of a busy street stood a small but lively diner. It wasn't the most famous place in town, but it had something special: warmth. The smell of hot coffee, fresh pancakes, and soft music created a friendly atmosphere that welcomed everyone inside. 24-year-old Emily moved quickly between the tables, her apron tied neatly around her waist. She had worked at the diner for almost 3 years. To her, this wasn't just a job, it was a place where she felt part of something. The other waiters and waitresses were like family. She knew the regular customers by name and remembered their favorite meals. She even knew which tables couples liked to sit at and which seats older customers preferred. By the window, Emily wasn't the loudest person in the room, but she was steady, kind, and fair. People trusted her. Whenever there was a problem, she handled it with calmness. She had a gentle voice that carried strength, and she never let anyone walk over her or the team. That day started like any other. She smiled as she served hot chocolate to a little girl sitting with her mother, then took an order from an older man who came every Tuesday for waffles. The kitchen buzzed with the sound of frying pans and cheerful conversations. The air was filled with laughter, footsteps, and the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread. Just before noon, the bell above the door rang, and a young man walked in. He wore a dark blue designer suit and expensive shoes that looked like they had never touched a crowded street. His hair was perfectly styled, and a shiny watch glimmered on his wrist. He looked like someone used to getting attention and expecting it. Emily noticed him as she carried a tray of drinks to a nearby table. At first, she didn't think much of it. People with money came to the diner sometimes. Some were polite, some were distant, but most treated the staff with basic respect. The young man sat at a booth near the center of the diner, tapping his fingers on the table as if the world should move at his speed. Emily sent one of the new waitresses, Mia, to take his order. Mia was in her second week at the diner. She was soft-spoken, shy, and still learning how to handle different types of customers. Emily kept an eye on her as Mia walked over with a notepad in hand. The young man leaned back in his seat, gave her a long look, and said something that made Mia shift nervously. She nodded quickly, wrote down the order, and hurried back toward the counter. Emily noticed her uneasy expression. "Everything okay?" Emily asked gently as Mia handed her the order slip. Mia forced a small smile. "Yeah, he just talks. Kind of strange, but I'm fine." Emily didn't push her, but she made a mental note to keep watch. A few minutes later, Mia went back to serve his drink. This time, the man snapped his fingers in the air, as if calling for attention. A couple sitting nearby turned their heads. Mia's hands trembled slightly as she placed the drink down. He leaned in closer and spoke again, making Mia take a small step back. This time, Emily walked over. "Hi there," she said with a polite smile. "Is everything all right with your order?" The man looked up at her, not expecting someone to step in. "I was just talking to the waitress," he said casually, picking up his drink. Emily's tone remained calm but firm. "I can help with anything you need." "She's new, so I'm just making sure everything goes smoothly," he smirked, like someone who didn't take being corrected seriously. "Well, then maybe you can train her to give better service." "I'm used to more attention." Emily didn't let his words shake her. "We treat every customer with respect here," she said, "and we expect the same in return." The man raised an eyebrow, almost amused. "I'm not being rude," he said. "I just want good service. You know who I am, right?" She shook her head lightly. "No, and it doesn't matter. Everyone is treated the same here." A few people around started to notice the conversation. Some whispered to each other quietly. Emily stayed calm, not raising her voice, not backing down. She had dealt with difficult customers before. This wasn't new. He leaned forward a little. "I don't think you understand. I could buy this whole place if I wanted to. Maybe you should be a little nicer." Emily smiled politely, but her voice was steady as a rock. "Sir, this place is about kindness, not money. If you'd like to enjoy your meal, you're welcome to." But if you speak disrespectfully to my staff again, I'll have to ask you to leave." He blinked, surprised that someone in an apron was standing up to him. Most people gave him what he wanted. That was how his world worked. He chuckled, as if trying to turn the situation into a joke. "You're funny," he said. "All right, I'll behave." But he didn't. When Mia returned with his food, he made more remarks. The kind that weren't loud enough for everyone to hear, but were clear enough to make someone uncomfortable. Emily caught Mia's uneasy glances. Enough was enough. Emily walked back to his table, her steps measured and sure. "Sir," she said softly but firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't tolerate this kind of behavior here." He looked at her in disbelief. "Are you serious? You're asking me to leave?" "Yes," she said simply. The room had grown quiet now. Customers who had been eating their lunch paused to watch. Even the cooks at the back peeked through the service window. It wasn't every day someone stood up to a man who carried himself like that. "I don't think you want to do that," he said. His tone carried the weight of someone used to getting their way. Emily didn't waver. "I do," she said. "This is a place where people should feel safe and respected. If you can't respect the staff, you can't stay." The manager, Mr. Parker, a kind older man with glasses, had been watching too. He stepped forward quietly and stood beside Emily, not saying a word at first, just giving silent support. The man glanced at Mr. Parker, then back at Emily. He was clearly not used to this. He looked around at the customers, who were now fully focused on the scene. Some nodded in quiet approval. A mother sitting near the door squeezed her daughter's hand gently, as if saying, "Watch this." "Fine," the man said at last, pushing his chair back. "You'll regret this." "You have no idea who I am." Emily kept her calm. "Maybe I don't," she said, "but I do know who we are, and we won't let anyone treat us unfairly." As he walked toward the door, a couple of people clapped softly, not loud or mocking, just a small show of respect. Emily didn't smile or cheer. She just exhaled slowly. Moments like these were never easy. Mia hurried over to her side. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, guilt in her eyes. "I should have." Emily gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong." "He did, and we took care of it." The other staff members gathered around quietly, their faces a mix of pride and relief. It wasn't just about that one man. It was about standing up together after he left. The diner slowly returned to its warm, lively rhythm. Someone cracked a small joke, and laughter filled the room again. Mia began to smile a little more, her shoulders no longer tense. But Emily knew something was different this time. She didn't know who that man was, but his reaction wasn't just a spoiled customer's tantrum. The way he had said, "You'll regret this," echoed in her mind. When her shift ended later that afternoon, she sat by the window with a cup of coffee. The sun was lower in the sky now, painting the street in golden light. She watched people walking past, some smiling, some lost in thought, all living their own lives. She thought about the moment she had stood up for Mia. It wasn't the first time she had defended someone at work, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. But there was something in the way the man had looked at her, something that told her this story wasn't finished yet. Parker joined her at the table. "You did the right thing," he said simply. Emily nodded. "I know. I just hope it doesn't bring any trouble." He gave her a reassuring smile. "No matter what comes, we stand together here. Always." She smiled back. That was why she loved this place. It wasn't just about coffee and pancakes. It was about people. About kindness. She didn't know that tomorrow something extraordinary was waiting just outside those glass doors. Something that would turn an ordinary day at a diner into a story that people would talk about for a very long time. The next morning began quietly. The sky was painted in soft colors of gold and pink as the sun slowly rose above the buildings. The diner, with its red and white sign, stood at the corner like it always had, warm, inviting, and full of the smell of fresh bread. Emily arrived a little earlier than usual. She wanted to check on Mia before the rush of customers began. As she tied her apron and pinned her hair back, she thought about the man from yesterday. His words still played softly in her mind. "You'll regret this." She wasn't scared, just a little unsettled. But she reminded herself why she did what she did. No one had the right to treat anyone badly, no matter how much money they had. She had protected someone who needed it, and that was something to be proud of. Mia walked in a few minutes later. She looked a little nervous, but smiled when she saw Emily. "Hey," she said softly, "morning." Emily replied, giving her a warm smile. "How are you feeling today?" Mia hesitated for a second, then said, "Better. I just keep thinking about yesterday. I've never seen anyone stand up like that before." Emily gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's what we do here. We stand up for each other." The morning went on as usual. Customers came in, some for their usual coffee, some for a full breakfast. Emily greeted each person with the same kind smile she always gave. The kitchen was busy. The smell of toast and scrambled eggs filled the air, and cheerful chatter echoed in the diner. But just before noon, the sound of a car engine outside caught everyone's attention. It wasn't just any car. It was a sleek, black luxury car. The kind that people usually only saw in magazines or on TV. Its windows were dark, its surface shiny, and it looked like it belonged to someone very important. The car stopped right in front of the diner. Customers began to glance out the window, whispering softly. "Who's that?" one woman asked her friend. Then came an even more surprising sound. A deep rhythmic beat began to fill the air. Thump-a-thump, thump. It grew louder with every second. People stepped outside to look. Above the diner, a helicopter hovered in the sky, its blades spinning powerfully. The sound was impossible to ignore. Emily felt her heart beat a little faster. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the front door. This was definitely not a regular day. The luxury car door opened slowly, and out stepped a tall, older man dressed in an elegant suit. His hair was silver, his posture straight, and his face calm but serious. There was something commanding about the way he carried himself, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that showed quiet power and confidence. People on the sidewalk stopped to stare. Even the cooks at the back pressed against the service window to see what was happening. The helicopter continued to hover in the background, and the sound of its blades seemed to make the world stand still for a moment. The man walked into the diner with smooth steps. The moment he entered, the atmosphere changed, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made everyone pay attention. Emily straightened her posture and stepped forward, ready for whatever was coming. He stopped in front of her and looked into her eyes, not with anger, but with a kind of calm respect. "Are you Emily?" he asked in a deep, steady voice. "Yes," she said, her voice just as steady. "My name is Richard." He said, "I believe you met my son yesterday." The room went silent. Everyone knew immediately who he was talking about. Mia, who had been wiping a table, froze for a second. Richard continued speaking, his voice even and controlled. "I heard about what happened here yesterday. My son, Alex, told me his version of the story. But then I spoke to others, and I realized the truth was different." Emily didn't say anything. She wanted to hear what he had to say. Richard took a slow breath and then did something no one expected. He slightly bowed his head toward her. "I came to apologize," he said sincerely, "for his behavior, for the way he treated your staff, and for the way he behaved when you asked him to leave. He was wrong." Mia covered her mouth in surprise. A man like him, someone with so much power and wealth, bowing his head to a waitress. It didn't happen every day. Emily blinked but remained composed. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "He made his choice. I just did what anyone should do." But Richard shook his head. "No, not everyone would have done what you did. Many people would have let it go because of who he is. You didn't. You treated him like any other person. And that is something I respect deeply." His words filled the room with a quiet kind of warmth. Customers who had been pretending not to eavesdrop were now smiling slightly. Richard continued, "My son grew up with everything handed to him: comfort, wealth, attention. But he forgot something important: respect. You reminded him, and you reminded me of something too. That real strength doesn't come from power or money. It comes from standing up for what's right." Emily didn't expect such words. She felt her chest tighten a little, not with fear, but with a strange, humble emotion. She wasn't used to being praised by people like him. Then Richard said something that made everyone's eyes widen. I would like to offer you something. Not because I want to erase what happened. Nothing can change that. I want to offer it because I want to say thank you. Emily raised an eyebrow slightly. Offer me something? He smiled softly. Yes, they ride. In that, he pointed outside. Everyone turned their heads toward the window where the helicopter still hovered above the building. A wave of whispers filled the diner. Emily blinked in shock. A helicopter ride? She repeated, almost laughing at how unreal it sounded. Yes, Richard said. I own the company that operates it, and I want to personally take you on a short ride over the city. A small gesture of gratitude for your courage and honesty. You didn't treat my son like a millionaire. You treated him like a man who needed to learn something. And that lesson matters more than you know. For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. All eyes in the diner were on her. Mia's mouth was slightly open, and Mr. Parker, the manager, stood in the corner with his arms folded and a proud smile on his face. Emily wasn't someone who chased luxury. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. She loved her simple life, the sound of the diner's morning rush, the warmth of hot coffee cups, and the laughter of regular customers. But something in Richard's voice told her this wasn't about money. This was about respect. She took a quiet breath. All right, she said finally, her lips curving into a small smile. I'll go. The diner burst into quiet excitement. Mia clapped her hands softly. A couple of customers cheered. And even the cook shouted from the kitchen, bring us pictures. Richard's smile widened. Wonderful. Let's go then. They stepped outside together. The helicopter hovered above an open lot nearby, and a team member guided them toward it. The wind from the spinning blades blew through Emily's hair, making her heart race a little with nervous excitement. She had never been in a helicopter before. In fact, she had never even been near one. Richard helped her step inside, and within minutes, they were lifting off the ground. The city began to shrink beneath them, the buildings turning into neat rows, the streets looking like tiny lines. Emily pressed her hand against the window, her eyes wide. She could see the river sparkling like silver, the bridges like thin ribbons, and the parks like patches of green. For a while, neither of them spoke. The view was breathtaking. The sound of the blades was loud but steady, like a heartbeat in the sky. Finally, Richard said, You know, my son called me last night. He was angry at first, but after we talked, he started to think about what happened. No one had ever told him no before. No one ever stood up to him. And maybe that's exactly what he needed. Emily listened quietly, still looking at the city below. He's young. Richard continued, but he needs to grow. And what you did, something so simple, something so honest, might just help him take the first step toward becoming better. I can't thank you enough for that. Emily turned to him and gave a small smile. I didn't do anything special, she said. I just did what was right. Richard shook his head gently. Doing what's right is always special. They flew over the city for a few more minutes. Emily felt something she hadn't expected, peace. Not because of the helicopter, not because of the attention, but because she realized something. Small acts of courage can change things in ways we don't see right away. When they landed, a few people were already outside the diner waiting. Word had spread fast. The waitress who had stood up to a rich man had just taken a helicopter ride with his father. But Emily didn't let it change who she was. She smiled, waved politely, and went back to work. Later that evening, after her shift, she sat at her favorite spot by the window with a warm cup of coffee. Mia joined her, her eyes still bright with excitement. That was the coolest thing I've ever seen, Mia said with a laugh. You looked like a movie star up there. Emily chuckled. I felt more like a bird who borrowed wings for a little while. They laughed together. A few days later, something unexpected happened again. A large envelope arrived at the diner. Inside was a handwritten letter from Alex, the young man who had caused all the trouble. I want to apologize, the letter said. I was rude. I acted like someone who thought the world owed me respect when I should have been giving it. You were right to ask me to leave. Thank you for doing it. I've never had someone stand up to me like that, and it made me think a lot. I hope one day I can earn the kind of